Hey, I'm Tom Dempsey, and I want to welcome you to this third volume of Jazz Discovery. If you've been with me for volumes 1 and 2, you've gained a solid foundation in jazz scales, harmony, and improvisational concepts. So here, in volume 3, we dive into the colorful world of modes, which is a crucial component for jazz guitar and the building blocks for creating emotive and nuanced jazz solos. From the bright and resonant Ionian mode to the mysterious and dissonant Locrian, we'll explore each mode in depth, learning to solo effectively with each. We'll also learn Quartal harmony across the modes with a modern approach to chord construction and voicings that will drastically alter your musical landscape. With hands-on lessons and a ton of practice sessions along the way, you'll learn to apply these concepts over famous modal jazz changes like So What and Maiden Voyage. So, are you ready to take on the Modal Jazz Challenge? Grab your guitar and let's go.
All right. Hey, everyone. I am Jeff Sheets, Director of Education here at TrueFire. Welcome to another episode of TrueFire Live. We've got a great show lined up here tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you're on the chat right now, drop a note there and let us know where you're tuning in from. Always fun to see where everybody is watching from tonight. We got a lot of folks already online checking this out. I think it's going to be some really cool stuff. So do that. We'll go ahead and get started. But as you have questions, drop a comment. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can throughout the night. I know Tom's got some stuff lined up. We want to show you some cool stuff about not only the newest course in this series, but also the first 2 volumes as well. So we're going to dig into all that, but let's go ahead and introduce the man of the hour, Mr. Tom Dempsey. How are you, Tom?
Good, Jeff. So great to see you, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's always a pleasure having you on. You're always one of our favorite people to have on to do these live things because you're not only a great player, you're a great educator and just an all-around swell guy. So we like to have you here.
I'm going to put that in the bio now.
It is. I can write your bio for you. No problem. No worries. Well, we got people tuning in from all over the place, everywhere from Chicago, Houston, Pittsburgh, San Diego, Portugal. That's so awesome. Glad to see everyone here. Think you're going to really enjoy this tonight. So, Tom, tell us a little bit about this series. Let's start out there because this, the new course that's just out now, folks can go pick it up right now, is volume 3 of the Jazz Discovery series. But you have a volume 1 and 2. So maybe step us through, what's in the first one, the second one, and bring us up here because Jazz Discovery, you're like the Lewis and Clark of jazz guitar and the discovery situation here. So tell us a little bit give us a little overview on the first 2 and bring us into the new one.
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of the 30,000 foot view of this whole thing is when I was starting to put together this series, it was kind of at a time in my life where I was really starting to kind of reflect on all my teaching and a lot of the things that I've been involved with over the years. I mean, obviously private teaching for a long time, teaching at the National Guitar Workshop for many years and being the director of music there and then teaching at Jazz at Lincoln Center and now, teaching at LaGuardia Community College and within the CUNY system. And, like any teacher, you find things that work and you find things that don't work. And so this was kind of the beginning of me trying to really take a real thoughtful and deliberate approach at documenting my pedagogy and documenting the way that I've found the best practices to be able to start to learn how to play jazz. And this is not the be all end all necessarily. This is just kind of my perspective on it. And so in volume 1, I start with, from a soloing perspective, start with pentatonic scales because most guitar players, that's kind of where they start. And the pentatonic scale, I have to say, sometimes gets a bum rap, especially in jazz. A lot of people come into jazz usually after exploring some other styles, whether it be rock or blues or folk music or whatever. And a lot of times their experience has been very pentatonic based. and they get to jazz and it's like, oh, I've got to do something completely different. Well, you can, sure, and this course takes you into other things, but the pentatonic scale is such a rich scale to start with, to be able to really feel like you're making music and really be able to feel like you're improvising. And because a lot of guitar players, at least speaking for myself, we tend to be sort of visually or tactile inclined, and so we feel and see these shapes on the neck of the guitar, and it's just, there's something, you know, comfortable with that. So the idea is taking this and being able to apply it to an improvisational setting. So we kind of start off with some the basic chords to kind of get you up and running, get you playing some of this music, and I'm dealing all with like real progressions, you know, progressions that come right out of the jazz canon. And so we do kind of a deep dive into the pentatonic world in volume 1. Then in volume 2, we kind of move into expanding it out a little bit more into more 7-note kinds of scales, your major scales and your minor scales, and get into some deeper kinds of harmony. And then in volume 3, we go to what generally ends up being kind of the next area where people have questions and have interest in, which is talking about the modes and understanding the modes. And I find that, you know, because guitar players tend to, again, approach the guitar in a very visual or tactile sort of way, one of the things that the guitar players can find challenging is really getting the sound of the mode in their ears and being able to represent it. I like to talk about the modes in terms of sonic colors and starting to hear the nuances between those different kinds of sonic colors. So those three volumes are like a kind of a good way to kind of really start to discover jazz, but in a way that's meaningful, hopefully, that really gets you up and playing and feeling like you're making music.
That's great. That's an excellent rundown of those. We just had a question come in. Is there going to be a volume 4 for the melodic minor modes?
So write your congressman. No, I would love to. Actually, you know, the whole idea with this series is that it's, you know, as they say, God willing and the creek don't rise, like that we can, you know, add on to this. And this can be sort of be in this ever growing, you know, kind of compendium of different things. So yes, whether volume 4 ends up being melodic minor scales or not, I would love to, you know, continue on with this series and really kind of flush it out even more. Yeah. I'm definitely not done with 3.
No,
there's a lot more to cover.
There's more to cover. I didn't cover quite all of it. No, for sure. Well, let's roll a track from this. Let's roll one of these, because for anyone who's not familiar with you know, this course or these courses, what they're going to look like, what they're going to get. Let's roll one of the lessons, maybe talking about the Dorian scale, and then we'll talk a little bit about after. Maybe you can go a little bit deeper into some of the information about there. But let's just roll that track. You know, most guys know the Dorian scale. Let's dig into that. So once again, I started off kind of simple. That's awesome, man. And yeah, you do a good breakdown of it, but let's do the breakdown here live. Let's talk about that, kind of what you're doing there as far as, just listening to that sound, right? Trying to get and hear that Dorian sound. Talk a little bit about that and where you're using that.
Yeah. So I talk about this in the course as well. There's kind of two different ways to approach modes in general. One is called the derivative approach, and the other is called the intervallic approach. The derivative approach tends to be the way that most people start, at least, to learn modes. And that's this idea that the mode is derived from different degrees of the major scale. So the Dorian mode is derived off of the second degree of the major scale. So if I have a C major scale, right, D is my second note, and if I go play all the notes in the key of C major from D to D, that's going to be the sound and the notes of the Dorian mode. But I have a saying that I like to use, that it's not about the notes, it's about the intervals. The intervals are what give music its sonic shape and its sonic definition. It's what tells us that this is Dorian. It's not just the notes itself. We have to understand how the notes relate to one another intervallically. Also, the modes are intrinsically connected to the diatonic chords. The 2 chord in any major key is always going to be a minor 7th chord. So this sound of D minor 7 is intrinsically connected to the sound of Dorian. Now, where a lot of guitar players go wrong is, or go, find challenges. And let me apologize for the sirens in the background. I live in Hell's Kitchen in Midtown Manhattan. That's not the jazz police coming to get me. It's just the beautiful sounds of my neighborhood. So where some guitar players find challenges, and other musicians too, I like to refer to my people specifically, is this idea that we've got to use all the notes for it really to be Dorian. And you really don't. Right? So you'll hear me now, those 3 notes I'm just using, in this case, 3 or 4 notes, right? And it's capturing the sound of Dorian, the sound of minor, that parent sound. It's not capturing all of it, but it's defining it really well. And a lot of it has to do with how I'm resolving my lines. In this case, I was resolving it to, a lot of times, to the tonic, or to the 5th. And if I go to the 3rd, understanding where those chord tones are. So getting the sound of the Dorian mode in your ears and really being aware of that is a very important aspect of understanding modes. So there's the derivative approach, then there's the intervallic approach. It's the second approach, which is where you ultimately want to live. And that's understanding that in the Dorian mode, we have a root, major 2nd, minor 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, major 6th, minor 7th, and root, which you can play by shifting or stretching, either way. But that's the total sound of the Dorian mode. But you can still capture a good part of its essence with 3 notes. And if you can get used to being able to extract those kinds of ideas from the mode, you're going to be right in there, and you're going to be making a lot of great music, coming from this basis of understanding modes.
Great. So what you're saying is you can get that sound without necessarily playing the scale all over the neck and everything, right? So you can sort of get that. So in that case, are you concentrating on the intervals that make the Dorian kind of a thing when you're playing through that? Or are you outlining chords as you're playing that?
It's a little bit of both. So, in a major key, or in the context of major keys, there are 3 minor modes. There's the Dorian mode, there's the Phrygian mode, and there's the Aeolian mode. Dorian is built off of the 2nd degree, Phrygian is built off of the 3rd degree, and the Aeolian is built off of the 6th degree. But each one has specific nuances with it. So the Phrygian, for example, one of the intrinsic characteristics of that is that we have a flat 2. So that's going to have a very specific sound. And if you start to understand the difference between that and, say, the Dorian, which has a major 2nd, as opposed to, which is Phrygian, that's Dorian. Now, that's also the same sound, the same first 5 notes as what we have with Aeolian, but where Aeolian goes different is we have a minor 6. So that's what I mean about understanding the different nuanced intervallic elements of these modes. If you think of the mode as the color blue, it's like different shades of blue. You know, you've got navy blue, sky blue, and I don't know, whatever the other shade of blue is, that navy blue, or I think I already said navy blue. So you get the idea. So it's just different shades of the same color, but all of them are minor colors, but they're going to bring a different sound to your improvisation.
Good answer. There's a good question here that you really have sort of answered in some ways, but let's drill down a little bit on it, which is, you know, how can you play modes without sounding like you're just playing scales? You know, what would be good advice for someone that's looking to get into more modal playing and understand the stuff that you just talked about, but feels like they sound a little bit like they're just running up and down scales when they play those different shapes?
That's a great question. And one of the intrinsically common challenges in modal playing. That's where really understanding the intervallic differences of the modes becomes really, really important. So I would suggest, stick with a static harmony. You know, if we're talking about the minor mode, right? And start to play with a few of the notes that still bring out the sound of Dorian. Like when I was playing just with those 3 notes. And always know where the notes of the arpeggio are, so that you can really have your lines cadence on those chord tones to bring out the sound of it. So I would break it down into small amounts, and to kind of avoid, if you know, at first maybe trying to improvise with the whole scale. Take little parts of it and try to see what you can make work. Transcribing can also be a great thing. Like one of the famous jazz songs is "So What" by Miles Davis. And in Miles, so that record, Kind of Blue, was really kind of the first modal jazz record that ever existed. And Miles had a very specific concept behind it, and wanting to play out of the sound of the modes. Now in his solo, so he plays this. Almost all of the notes there, that's the first 8 bars of his solo. All of the notes there, with the exception of one, are also the same as the minor pentatonic. Right? The only one that's a little different is that sixth. And then he does in the second 8 bars. And then that movement from the second degree, and then bringing in the second and the fourth, those are what makes it distinctly sound like Dorian. And so understanding where those nuances are in the mode itself, as far as the intervals go, will go a long way in getting you to sound more musical and less like a scale. So like when you hear that solo, when you hear that, it doesn't sound like a scale, I hope. But the minor pentatonic is right there. So it's a combination of knowing those intervallic ideas. Also, too, what's really going to help you, and we talk about this a little bit in the series too, is how you develop little motifs and little phrases. Taking a call and response. Repetition. A little different. Response. Ending. Nice sentences. Breaks, right? So those kinds of things can help break you out of it just sounding like a scale.
Good advice. So would you suggest guys practice the modes over specific progressions and voicings that help bring those modal sounds out, or a little bit more static things where you're really just using the scale to color it? In other words, having the chords and the chord voicings be very modal sounding, or having them be a little more static and then you applying the mode and the modal sound over the top via your single note lines?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I work with students on this, there's kind of a multi-pronged approach to it. First of all, I have an approach to looking at the guitar neck, which is rooted in this concept called tonality shapes, which are the 5 octave shapes that are in the 12 fret span of the guitar. So with students, what I will start them with is I will start them, if we're working on Dorian, let's say we down here. I'll have them play it within the octave shape itself so they can hear it from tonic to tonic. Then I'll have them play the arpeggio and then the chord, and then go to the next shape. Arpeggio, and then the chord. And then have them play the chord. So it's always scale, arpeggio, chord. So we're linking up the melodic aspect of the scale with the melodic aspect of the chord within the chord in a harmonic form. So that's how I have students kind of work on understanding the fingerings and learning that. Once we get we start to solidify that, then I start with static chords and being able to improvise over static chords. And then limiting the number of note choices too, so that you're not overwhelmed by all 7 notes, right? So the idea is, yeah, you're playing out of the mode, and understanding the nuances of it is going to take a minute, but starting to relate it to its parent harmony, where the harmonic structure that's associated with each of these modes, you can start to do that with taking kind of smaller intervals. So I think static harmony is a good place to be, to start off with all of this.
Sounds good. So if folks aren't really familiar as familiar with how these courses work, let's show them a little example. So Tommy is in the studio, and let's run through this and just show them, the fact that the video is synced up with the tab. You can loop stuff, slow stuff down. Give us a little rundown of that, because it's pretty amazing, the technology that helps you learn here.
Yeah, it's pretty killer. And, I know someone had a question about it would be nice to have some cool examples to work each of these modes out. And that's what's great about this course, is that Tom's laid this out in such a useful way in each one of these studies. So we work through the modes really systematically through each one of them. And each one you're going to get a demonstration. It'll take you through, give you the lesson, teach you the ins and outs, teach you about the characteristic tones, the things that you're really trying to target when you're playing these modes. Really gives you a lot of theory background too, which is awesome. I know a lot of people always appreciate getting a better understanding of harmony as they're working things in with applications. So that's a really cool benefit of this course too. So yeah, we get into each of the modes. We talk about where they come from. Then we do the sort of the scale shapes, the lesson and the demo there. Then you get to do a little bit of practice session where you're actually playing a really cool solo like the one that you heard. Where in each of those, Tom, you start very basic with just kind of bringing the notes to the forefront. So you just hear it, you really hear the sound isolated of that mode. And then you start to, where do you go from there in each one of these? You sort of get a little bit more improvisational with each.
Yeah. I mean, I generally start with each section that we are introducing this playing part with the mode, is really kind of playing the mode pretty simply over the static harmony. All of these are basically the static harmony backing tracks. And so that you can just hear all the notes of the mode played in relationship to the harmony. And then I start to do kind of what I was doing here with taking smaller phrases, just a few notes at a time, and then kind of growing on that and expanding upon it. And, with all of this stuff, and, it's very easy, I know, for people, like when you see like all of that music, it's like, oh, I've got to learn all of that. Just start with a little phrase. I mean, we're talking about a language, right? And, ultimately, like, you need to, with any language, you could learn how to conjugate the verbs and learn all these vocabulary words. But if you don't know how to order a cup of coffee in that language, you're going to be sleep deprived, or if you're me. So, so just like take one phrase. If you get one phrase, you're already starting to build your vocabulary. And that phrase is not just a dormant phrase. Like, you can take that and turn it into something of your own. But the idea is to try and give you some structure here to see how what seems maybe like a little esoteric concept with this idea of modes, how it can really become creative and artful.
Yeah, that's a perfect jumping off point. Let's take a look and listen to this. This is from the Mixolydian section of the course.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just play a little bit, and I'll show folks how the tools work.
See, that's just the mode going up. That's just the mode ascending. So that's how a lot of times I start this off.
Just real simple, right?
Yeah.
And you can really get the sound of it in your ear. And then you're going to start to see it kind of, evolves from there. Let's play some more. So already starting to introduce a little bit more swing feel, a little bit more, it's getting jazzier and jazzier as we go. Yeah, let's keep playing a little bit more, and I'm going to show you guys the other tools here. that's a great example. I love that little phrase right there. What's cool about the tools here in the player is you're able to isolate, just like Tom was saying. Don't try to tackle the whole thing all at once, right? And we were just chatting about this before we jumped on this live stream about how much cheating this really is, for students to be able to do this. But let's just say we wanted to work on that little 4-bar phrase in there. And this may not be the perfect selection, but you get the feel. Okay, so not the most studio ready loop I just made there, but pretty cool. The tools are there for you. Take 1 bar at a time, work on that, and then slow it down however much you want. Down an increment. So you can really bring it down to speed. For when we get a little bit more, you start to see a little bit more black on the page, as they say in some of these, and that's where you have these tools to be able to jump in there and get it down to the pace that you need it to work with it, and then you work it up to speed, right? Another really cool thing I just point out real quick is also, along with this interactive tab, you also have the fretboard view. So this is a little bit more like if you were holding the guitar in hand and looking down, you have that view kind of looking down at the neck. And one of the things I just kind of sort of noticed this, if you just drag your selection out, and let's just say you're focusing on a couple of bars at a time, you'll see the map of the notes on the neck for just what you've selected. So if you just select 1 bar, and piece by piece, you can see the way those notes laid out. And then they light up as you're. So some really cool stuff in here. And of course, there's other tools that are included. There's the metronome. If you just want to practice with a metronome, you have that option. You also have the jam track. If you want to jam along without Tom's guitar on there, that's a great tool as well. And then, of course, you have the PDFs and you have the guitar profiles if you like to work in those tools too. So really just, I think, a great selection of tools. I know a lot of our viewers are familiar and know and love this stuff, but for those that are not as familiar, there's a little tour of the way the interface works on TrueFire, and you have this on all 3 of these Jazz Discovery courses and all the other courses on TrueFire for that matter. So
absolutely. And Tom has a ton of great courses at TrueFire. I mean, I think Tom's got a dozen courses, probably 12 courses, I think. Covering a wide range of stuff, a wide range of deep dives into scales, deep dives into licks. I mean, some really good stuff on there. So go follow the link underneath the video there, and you'll see all of his courses. You'll be able to check out everything, and they all feature all those cool, tools to be able to learn from. So, we appreciate Tom once again as not only a great educator, as his resume says, but a great player as well. And I will say, someone told me that Tom has got a new album coming out. And I basically said, that's a likely story. And as fate would have it, Tom does have a new album coming out, and he can tell us a little bit about that. So let's talk about your new record coming out, Tom.
Oh, wow. Thanks, man. So likely story. It is a recording of 10 of my original compositions. Basically, with this recording, I did everything kind of different than I've done on all of my other recordings, because so many things have changed in the world of music, and also just so many things have changed in our just general world. It used to be when I would put out a recording, it would be with a label, and it would be somewhat formulaic with some of my original compositions, and then some standards and some others. And I've you're always told, like, well, don't put out a whole thing of all of your own music. And I said, screw it, I'm going to put out a whole record of my own music, because I wrote a lot of music, especially over the pandemic. So A lot of these tunes come from that period, and it's features 10 of my original compositions. Features Rick Germanson on piano, Santi DiBriano on bass, and Dion Parson on the drums. And we seem to be releasing records in sort of a different way right now. So I'm doing it all through my own music company, and it's available for pre-order right now on my website and on Bandcamp. The record is going to be released on July 11th, but 2 of the cuts are available on all the streaming platforms. The title cut, Likely Story, and a ballad that I wrote for inspired by my mother, and it's called Graceful Presence. Both of those are streaming, and there's also video on YouTube from the recording session of both of those. The third single is going to be released next Friday, and that's the first tune on the recording, called Push On Through. And then all of the songs will be released into the digital atmosphere, and also be available in physical form on July 11th.
Oh, that's great, man. That's so great. Glad the tracks that I listen to, the YouTube takes are awesome, amazing playing, as always. So excited for you to get the whole album out. Hopefully everybody that's on this, go buy this album. I mean, it's great music. It's great stuff. It supports an amazing artist, someone who's a true, musician, basically, in every sense of the word. Tom, that's what he does. He gigs. How many gigs do you do? What's your gigging schedule like these days, Tom?
I mean, it really kind of depends on the week. It's about to get a little bit busier, but I'm generally gigging anywhere from 3 to 7 nights a week. So
yeah, so gigging every night, teaching during the days, somehow finding time to do some TrueFire courses, and put out an album. So man, that's the beautiful thing. That's the living the dream kind of situation. So let's all go buy the albums, buy his courses, and support cats like Tom that are out there doing it. Let's take a couple. There's a couple other questions, and people threw in questions about the modes.
Okay.
Kind of talking about the once a little bit you talked about, but the characteristic notes of the modes, and how you look at that when you're, juxtaposing Dorian and Phrygian, a little bit of what you went over there, but how do you look at that? How would you suggest guys practice that and develop an understanding and maybe get that in their ear a little bit better to be able to tell the difference between modes?
Sure. It's a great question. So first of all, we need to know how the modes all correspond to their parent chords, the parent harmony. So Ionian, built off of the first degree, the parent chord there is a major 7 chord. Dorian, built off of the second degree, is the parent chord is a minor 7 chord. Phrygian, which is built off of the third degree, parent chord there is also a minor 7 chord. Lydian, built off of the fourth degree, parent chord there is a major 7 chord. The fifth degree Mixolydian, that's where that's built off of. Parent chord there is a dominant 7th chord. The Aeolian mode is built off of the 6th degree. Parent chord there is a minor 7 chord. And then finally, the Locrian mode, which is built off of the 7th degree, the parent chord there is a minor 7 flat 5 chord. Now, first, I think it's important to kind of put these into groups. So we have 2 major modes, Ionian and Lydian. Okay, let's start with those specifically. So the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, right? Or root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, root. What distinguishes this from the Lydian mode is in Lydian, we have a sharp 11 or sharp 4. I really should say sharp 4. Sharp 4 and sharp 11 are just the same. Turn the guitar down just a tad. Got it. Okay. So that's your Ionian, Lydian. Now, even though these are all major 7 chords, this is really, that's really the parent chord for your Lydian. And you can hear the difference, right? So I think grouping them into groups based on the harmonic sonority that they're associated with is a great way to start to understand the differences between it. Now, one of the things I meant to kind of point out in that in the music that Tommy was playing and how it was all written out there, if you go back and look at just about any of the things that I played, and if you look at the ends of the phrases, the almost to a phrase, each one resolves or cadences on the chord tone that's the parent chord. So that's also a good way to bring out the sound of the chord while also kind of capturing the nuances. Now, this is where understanding the intervallic approach is so important, because if you can start to hear the difference between C Ionian and C Lydian, that's off of the same root. That's more Ionian, whereas the other one was Lydian. So starting to break it down into the different harmonic sonorities. So inside of all of our modes, we have the major modes, those 2. We have our minor modes, Dorian, Phrygian, and Aeolian. And we've talked a little bit about that already and what the intervallic distinctions are between that. All of those modes, the Dorian, the Phrygian, and the Aeolian, I'll do it off of D, are all going to have those notes, which are the notes of the arpeggio of the chord. Where the differences are going to be are the non-chord tones, right? So in the Dorian, we have a minor 6, or sorry, a major 2nd and a major 6th. Major 2nd, major 6th. There's the same 4th and 5th within the Dorian. So it's really just the 6ths and the 2nds that are going to be different. In the Phrygian, we have a minor 2nd and a minor 6th. And the Aeolian is going to be like Dorian. We have that minor 6th there. So we have a major 2nd and a minor 6th. These are very subtle differences, but understanding the intervallic differences is going to be very helpful. Third type of harmonic sonority that we have in the modes is the dominant 7th chord, which is where our mixolydian is. And that's going to bring out the sound of that, of the Dorian. And then finally, the last mode that we have, the Locrian mode, that's going to be associated with our minor 7 flat 5 chord. So that's going to have a very distinctly different sound because the chord is a minor 7 flat 5, something completely different than what we've seen before. So I think understanding the intervallic differences between all of these modes in relationship to the 4 different categories of the sonic harmony is a really important thing to start to be aware of. Very good.
Tell us a little bit about Quartal harmony, right? That's the other thing that you're talking about in this course. Give us a little intro to that and a little overview of how you're looking at that.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the modes.
Yeah. So we're talking about Quartal, Quartal, harmony. You can sometimes hear it sound like Quartal, Chordal. We're testing my spelling here, but yeah. So Quartal, meaning that the harmony is built in. Well, you can do it different ways, but the way I talk about it in the course is in relationship to what we call diatonic force. Now, the beautiful thing about diatonic force on the guitar is it's sort of built in because the guitar is tuned in force, right? So it's an interesting sound because it gets to be very open sounding. So if I'm taking these notes, so if I've got D, G, C, and F, Jazz Police is coming, right? So I'm going to take and think about each one of the notes on the string as being, in this case, out of Dorian. And I'm going to move up, keeping the diatonic force in place to this chord, and then move up another set of force. Now, in this first set of force, we had a perfect fourth, all perfect fourth, perfect fourth, perfect fourth, perfect fourth. Here, in order to stay diatonic, we have to go augmented fourth, perfect fourth, and then perfect fourth, augmented fourth. But all of these notes are going to be part of D Dorian. So what it helps to do is create this very interesting sound in another color. Instead of going like, if I was just playing a D minor, instead of doing that, I can move these shapes around. And I'm actually kind of playing with the mode in a more harmonic kind of color. So that's really kind of what chordal harmony is. It's not, it's voicing the chord in this case, diatonic force, and sticking to, with each chord that you're voicing it in terms of the notes of the mode, in this case, Dorian. But it's got a lot of applications. One of the people that's kind of most closely associated with this, with kind of introducing this, was like was a piano player named McCoy Tyner, who played with John Coltrane, and and this sound quickly got into guitarist ears and became part of that sound too. So that's really cool thing to kind of get into and start to add to your harmonic tool chest.
That is really good to be able to do that. Great explanation too, by the way. So let's listen to one more track. I just love the way you sort of build these up from basically listening to the sound to then adding some phrases and just making things a little bit more spicy. So let's listen to this one with the Locrian, because that is a different sound to start with. So let's play this track and hear how you sort of build off of that.
So it has a very distinct
Yes, a very distinct sound.
yeah.
So yeah, let's talk just a little bit about Locrian. I know it definitely has a distinct sound compared to the other modes. Why is that?
Well, first of all, well, it's for a couple of reasons. First of all, the parent chord of the Locrian mode is your minor 7 flat 5 or half diminished 7th chord. It goes by both names. Truth be told, my preference is to refer to it as a minor 7 flat 5 chord because I feel like more accurately describes not only what the chord is, but generally speaking, how it's functioning. So that the arpeggio, you've got a diminished triad with a minor 7th, right? So that's already a different kind of sound. So, and it's got a certain sort of already built into it a little bit of tension because of those kinds of intervals. Now, if you were to go back, or when you go back and take a look at that lesson, that video, if you notice, a lot of times when I was playing, I was trying to resolve to chord tones, but especially in the beginning, a lot of times to the tonic, right? Trying to really capture that sound in there by just a few notes. So much like with some of the others too that I talked about, when I resolve the lines, if you go back and really do kind of a deep dive into each phrase, by and large, I am resolving to chord tones. They're cadencing on chord tones. And that's what helps to give more definition to your lines as well. And that's always, I think, a challenging thing for a lot of guitar players, regardless of when they're improvising, because, we don't have anything, generally speaking, physically holding us back from playing, like breath. So a lot of times we're so concentrated on, I want to play this scale over this chord, that we lose sight of the definition of the sentence structure, of the punctuation of each of the individual lines that helps to bring that definition. So I think starting to become aware of that in the context of learning these modes, of being able to apply them to your improvisation, is a really important thing to do here. But really knowing where those chord tones are is going to be really important.
Great, chord tones. And that's something, once again, this version, this volume, I should say, of the Jazz Discovery series, it really focuses in on the modes. And let's go over just once again for folks, the first volume, right, is really a little more pentatonic based, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of more thinking about pentatonics. How do you think about that as far as outlining the chords or playing the certain notes when you're just playing pentatonics? Obviously, you've got less notes, less colors, if you will, to work with. How do you still make that sound interesting?
Well, I mean, the pentatonic sound is a great sound. Again, I want to advocate for the pentatonic scale because I feel like it gets shortchanged sometimes. There's so much great music that are great solos. There's a solo Kenny Burrell did. I was just working on this with a student today. This is off of Back in the Chicken Shack on the Jimmy Smith recording. All minor pentatonic until he gets here. And then he goes. Now that's just a C major. But here's mixolydian. And then he goes back to pentatonic. And on and on and on. on. So like there's an example of one of the great jazz masters using a pentatonic scale. And Kenny Burrell did it, John Coltrane did it, all sorts of great musicians have done it. And remember, like that's where if you can start to wrap your head around intervallic structure in the long run, that's going to serve you really well. Because remember, a pentatonic scale is 5 of the 7 notes of a mode. They all share that in common. There's only two extra notes that we're adding with when we get into the modes. And a lot of times those extra notes are what contribute to the nuance difference in those. Yes, there are technically less notes, but more is not necessarily better. There's a lot of really good meat and potato definition and improvisational content within just those 5 notes of the major and the minor pentatonic. And again, same thing with modes that I was talking about and understanding the sonic differences. Understanding the differences with the pentatonic scale is really important because again, we as guitar players, we might learn our, let me take like if I were to play the D minor pentatonic, like we might learn it like this. Now that's hard to hear D minor when I'm doing that. Or if I were to do it like, there's my D minor pentatonic, but you don't hear that. But if I play it like, now all of a sudden, oh yeah, there's D minor. Right? So understanding it in relationship to the tonic and really understanding it in relationship to its parent chords is really, really important. Because a lot of times we learn pentatonic scales in terms of a box fingering or plug your fingers in this area, we lose track sometimes or end up inadvertently losing track of the sonic identity of it. So being able to kind of make those connections is going to be really important when playing with the pentatonics.
Very good, man. Very good. So a couple more questions, and I want to roll with these give me your quick answers here. When you're using the Locrian over that minor 7 flat 5, do you generally start on the 2 or on the 3? Do you have a preference, or do you think
on the 2 or on the 3? You mean on the second degree or the third degree of this? Yeah. No, I mean I'm thinking about when I'm playing Locrian, again, at this point, like I'm thinking of all of these modes intervallically. So I understand the connection to the parent chord. And so I'm really thinking about this minor 7 flat 5 sound, this sound. So I'm really thinking of it in terms of resolving into chord tones. So if I go, so I'm not thinking of it in terms of the second degree, is not so much as far as where I'm starting from. I can start really from anywhere. I could start from the second, but it's not so much where I start, but where I resolve to, because that's going to be sort of like the end thought to my phrase.
Gotcha. Good answer. So there's one other question here that is actually, it's going to lead us into doing a whole other one of these, which is talking about playing outside. That's a whole long lesson in itself. But obviously, once again, another good subject for the next few volumes of Jazz Discovery, really.
Right. And I'll just say real quickly about playing outside. A lot of times when we talk about playing outside or playing, different kinds of things that are maybe outside of the actual harmony, all of that outside playing is only going to be as strong as your resolution. Like you can know the hippest scale in the world to play over a dominant 7 altered chord, and if you can't resolve it effectively, it's lost. It's like if you have a Maserati, but you don't know how to drive standard, right? It's like you're not going to get out of first gear, right? So I'm assuming Maseratis are all manual transmission cars, but any rate, the important thing is getting the definition to happen in your ideas. So you can play outside all you want, and you can have all this stuff that's, whoa, it's out there, but once you have to be able to resolve it at some point in order for it to make sense. So that's where spending some time working on modes to really capture that definition is going to serve your modal playing, but also eventually your outside playing further on down the road.
That is great. Not to mention the sirens are really loud outside. So if you were playing outside, it would be, no, sorry.
Yeah.
But, all right. So I know we've run out of time. We appreciate you being here so much as always, man. It's always a blast. Tommy and I always enjoy it when you stop by for a visit, as do all of the TrueFire students and the folks tuning in. So thank you so much for that. Everybody go check out all of Tom's courses. The brand new volume 3 in the Jazz Discovery series is launched. I believe we've even got a bundle there where you can pick up all 3 of them, which is really cool, because then you start with the first one, go to 2, go to 3. It's going to make a lot of sense. They definitely do go together. And be sure to go check out Likely Story, Tom's new recording, because it's not only good stuff, it's good live music. We're all being replaced by AI these days. So pick up some good live human music while you can. And in the meantime, if you would do us all a favor and maybe play a little something, play us out here, man.
Sure.